Choose Linux, Episode 1, for January 24th, 2019. Hello and welcome to the show that captures the excitement of discovering Linux. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
So this is episode 1 of Choose Linux. I suppose we'd better explain a little bit about the show. First of all, Jason, you got into Linux about 6 months ago and have been writing about it on Forbes ever since. Is that right?
Yeah. It started as a hobby and something that might be cool to tinker with and write about occasionally, and now it's just pretty much exclusively what I cover, and it's consumed everything.
Excellent. And I've been using Linux on the desktop since about 2008. I kind of tinkered a little bit before then. But yeah, I've been using it seriously for 11 years now. I can't believe it's that long.
Wow.
So the show's really just an excuse for me to get together with you every couple of weeks and ask you about what you've been playing with, what you've been writing about, what you've been doing with Linux.
Well, there's no shortage of that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And for me, it's about just having a conversation with people about all the exciting stuff that I'm playing with and discovering. And what's really, I think, unique about this show is that you're a bit cynical, I hear.
I've been known to be called that, yeah.
So you might kind of level me out, and set me on the right path from time to time.
Yeah, maybe. Right, well, let's dive straight into it. The first thing I've noticed on Twitter and Forbes lately is this Elementary OS challenge that you're right in the middle of.
Yeah, it's funny. I came up with this idea, this title, right? Like 2 months ago. Just Elementary OS Challenge. That sounds so fun. What is that about? How do I do that? Because several months ago, just very, very shortly after kind of diving into Linux and, rocking Ubuntu and everything, I decided I'm going to check out some of the distros. And Elementary was one of the first. And it was really clean and really elegant, but I didn't spend too much time with it because you know how distro hopping is. You sort of have these short affairs with distros, and then you go back to like your comfort, your home, right? But I wanted to sort of challenge myself to use nothing but Elementary OS, no tweaks either, right? Nothing, just out of the box, what's on the App Center and what you can get without adding a PPA. Okay,
and thankfully they have Audacity, so we can do this show.
Yes, exactly. Yep, recording it on Elementary. And then I just kind of came up with some loose rules for it, and thought, well, this will be really fun to make it a kind of a community experiment. I wanted to get out of my Ubuntu comfort zone. I wanted to generate some content. I wanted to learn some new things, and I wanted to also challenge other people to get out of their own comfort zone, whether it was Windows or Mac OS or another Linux distribution, right? And just give this a fair shake for 2 weeks. And so I set up a Telegram group, and it's crazy. There's like 140 people in there after 48 hours. It has been a revelation to see all of these people that are either Elementary veterans or brand new people to Linux, or people who have just stuck to, Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Debian or whatever, come in and kind of follow the same rules and like help each other and share the little insights they have and gripes they have and stuff like that. It's been a blast so far.
I did notice a little bit of criticism though, because Elementary OS isn't really for everyone, is it? It's very much its own thing, and you kind of have to like it or lump it.
That's really the impression that I get, and I think a lot of that, it's a very rigid operating system, right? I mean, the developers have this super precise vision of how they think your workflow should be and how they think the user experience should be. And they do not deviate from that. Like, oh, you want a minimize button? No, you don't get a minimize button. And that was actually, I could not believe it. This morning, this conversation in the Elementary OS Challenge Telegram group went on for like thousands of words for like an hour and a half. And a little bit before we started recording, it actually picked back up again. And it was just people going back and forth in excruciating detail about minimizing a window. I have never seen a discussion like this, so complex and so heated, healthy but heated, right? About minimizing a window.
Yeah.
It was incredible to me that people can hone in on this one specific thing and have so many opinions. It was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening.
So how are you getting along with the challenge so far?
Well, we're about halfway through the challenge, and I don't know if I've really come up with a solid opinion of the OS yet. I can say that there are many things I like about it and a few little grievances, such as the lack of a minimize button. And that's because Windows and Mac OS has given us years and years of that workflow to get, blasted into our muscle memory, right? So you just want that on there. But once you start to work around that, once you realize, hey, I can just hit Super H, or I can just click the app's icon in the dock to minimize it, then you start to become more comfortable with it. And there's little things, little touches that I love about the design, just the desktop experience. Like if you hit your battery icon on the top panel and you have Bluetooth devices connected, it will show you the battery life remaining of those Bluetooth devices along with your own laptop's battery. And you'll see apps that are consuming, maybe an extra bit of power that you might want to minimize or something. It's little touches like that. And it's like things like how every icon up there is just perfectly spaced and not too close and not too far apart. And, it also does very well. I have a high DPI screen. I'm using the Dell XPS 13. So it's a 4K screen. And for the majority of every app that I've launched, the scaling is wonderful. And it's just really clean and really easy. And I went into it probably like a lot of other Linux users do. All right, what can I tweak? I need to fix this. I want to fix this. I want to change the theme. And then once I realized, wait, this is like kind of, part of the rule set is no tweaks. Just accept it as it is and see what you think after a couple weeks. Once I got out of that mindset, I really started to enjoy it and just started to get stuff done.
And so is it too early to say whether you'll be sticking with it after the challenge?
For me, yes. I wish I could tell you why I haven't made up my mind. It's I'll be honest, there's something about Ubuntu. I cannot define it. I'm pretty much a noob in this world still, but there's something just comfortable and welcoming when I go back to Ubuntu. I don't know what it is though. I really don't. I'll tell you this, I love the Pantheon desktop. I absolutely love that. And that's, I know that the Pantheon's going to start coming to Fedora in the next few months. And so it might be interesting to try out that desktop environment on other distros. Maybe that will be like the winning combination. I don't know. In my limited opinion, Elementary just feels a touch too restrictive, just a touch.
What, with the lack of configuration?
Yeah, with the lack of configuration and there's little quirks like the fact that and I don't know how common this is, but the fact that in their App Center, Telegram, for example, is several versions old.
Oh, right.
So it's little things like that. But on the flip side, they have a lot of really great indie developers making apps just for the App Center. And I think a lot of those are really worth digging into and probably even giving, the developers a buck or two because they're designing these apps that really seem to complement Elementary OS. They're not bloated. They're really clean and they just get the job done and they have only what they need to get the job done.
Yeah, no, I've tried Elementary OS before. I'm not taking part in this challenge, I'm afraid, because I'm too grumpy and too set in my ways. But I've tried it before when the Juno release came out, version 5, and I was very impressed with it, but it's just not for me. I think that it really is either for you or it's not. It's not the kind of distro where, like Ubuntu Mate, for example, you can make that into almost anything you want. Whereas with Elementary OS, it is what it is, and you either like it or you don't. And it's just not quite for me, I don't think.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because they have such a clear vision for what they want, and there's really not much deviation happening with that. And like you said, you can fire up your, Linux flavor of choice and make it what you want if it's not quite there. But with Elementary, it really is. I think it's not a love-hate relationship, but it's maybe a love or relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's what we call in the UK Marmite, I think. Some people really love it and some people just can't get on with it. And I think I'm the latter, although I know Dan fairly well, the founder of Elementary OS, and I really understand where he's coming from with it. He's got some really defined design principles, and he just has this vision for what an operating system should be. And, it's not just him. He's not just a dictator or whatever. It's him and the team, but they have this really defined vision. And I think that, I don't know if it's unique in the Linux world, but it's certainly unusual to have such a defined vision and to just focus so much on exactly what they want and sacrifice customization and configurability in order to do that. And we always have the choice to choose another distro. And that's kind of their philosophy, is this is how we think a distro should be, and take it or leave it, which I think is good. I think we need more of that rather than trying to be all things to all people. If you're going to stand out as a distro, then I think that's the best way to do it, because there are plenty of other options if you want a specific other way of using your computer.
Yeah. And I have to mention this, Joe. I never would have imagined that the co-founder of an operating system would come into my Telegram group, right? And just start talking to people and answering their questions and telling them, hey, this is why we had this design choice. Here's a blog about it. And here's some productivity tips, right? Sure, it's only, Elementary OS only has a few 100,000 users, but it's not some obscure little distro either. And it just impressed me that those guys took the time to show up and actually be approachable and personal with everybody in there.
Yeah, I think Elementary is just the right size for this, where they've got enough users to be a serious distro, but the team behind it aren't so busy that they just don't have time to engage with the community, and they don't have that separation. You couldn't imagine Mark Shuttleworth, for example, jumping in a Telegram group talking to Ubuntu users, right? Because it'd just be crazy. There'd just be so many of them, and he just doesn't have time to do that. So I think that some people have called it a boutique distro, Elementary OS, and I think that might be fair, but it's one of the more popular ones.
How long do you think there'll be a boutique distro?
That's a very good question. It's kind of a meaningless term anyway. At what point do they add enough staff or get enough users to not be a boutique distro? It's too difficult to say. But one thing we haven't talked about is the financial side of things, which they're very much unashamed of. You have to purchase the ISO in the first place. You can purchase it for $0 if you want, but you have to actively do that. And then similarly, with a lot of the apps in App Center, they are strongly encouraging you to pay for them, which again is very unusual in the whole Linux space, and I think is a very good thing. But have you seen any controversy in the Telegram group regarding that?
I really haven't. And to be honest, I did expect a little bit of blowback about that, but haven't heard it yet. What I have heard is several people mentioning that they appreciate that that's an option, and they appreciate that indie developers have an opportunity to get paid for their work. But the reason behind that is, hey, I'm a user and I love your podcasting client for Elementary OS. Can you add this feature? Well, if a developer's not making any money on this software, maybe they wouldn't be so inclined to include that feature as if they were making some kind of an income, right? And a paying user comes along and says, I'd love to see this feature. Would you consider adding it?
Yeah.
That was the angle that the Telegram group was taking, which I really thought was cool.
Yeah, that is encouraging to see, because that's the reality. Developers need to get paid. And I think it's really good that Elementary OS are pushing that idea forward. So we'll have to see how this challenge works out, whether people can stick with it for 2 weeks. I have failed without even trying, I'm afraid, but I'm sure that plenty of listeners will get into it, and maybe some people will stick with it long term. So we'll have to see about that.
And stay tuned for the Arch Linux challenge 5 years from now.
I was going to say, yeah, maybe start with Manjaro. So something else you've been playing with recently is OpenMediaVault, which is a network storage solution on steroids.
Apparently it is. I don't know what they mean by steroids, though, because I have literally no experience with network attached storage or a server environment. So I just threw myself into this blind, right? And the reason is, I've got files all over the place. I've got a bunch of systems, music, movies, docs, projects, whatever. And I just kind of wanted to learn something new. And in the process, hopefully, consolidate all of this stuff into one place. And then also have all these machines back up to this one place periodically, right?
Yeah, because you want all your backups in one place, of course.
Well, it's a learning process, right? It's a learning process.
Yeah, well, it's better to have them there as well as wherever they are originally.
Yeah. And kind of the primary thing was I have like 93 gigabytes of music because I'm not one of those people who just streams everything. And it's all sitting on Google Music right now, and I'd kind of like to escape that. Have one less thing that I'm reliant on Google for.
Yeah, it would be nice.
So I just kind of threw myself in head first, and man, this was not an easy thing. I read all of these articles saying, hey, OpenMediaVault is awesome for beginners. Anybody can NAS, that kind of attitude. And I was like, no, not anybody can do this. I tried. I got as far as successfully installing it on the second try. And I, after figuring out what the heck the IP address was, right? Because I have very little command line experience. So I had no idea. How do I find, I know this sounds really dumb probably to a lot of listeners, but I had no idea how to discover the IP address of this box with OMV on it so that I could use the web interface to administrate it on a different PC. And so unfortunately, I had to Google that. I was trying to, go in without any tutorials, but I had to Google that, what the command was. So I got that, and then I successfully, fired up the web administration page and created a user and, activated FTP and did some stuff like adding the DAAP plugin, I think it's called, for streaming audio out to other devices. But man, it was very unintuitive. I had no experience, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna fire up this web interface and like start dragging and dropping things into a folder, and it'll just upload it.
Yeah.
No, no. First, create your user, and then add FTP functionality, and then create a shared folder that user can access via FTP, and figure out all those privileges, and then FTP the stuff there. And I started getting a little lost, honestly. I started just kind of losing the plot. And I couldn't help wonder, is there an easier way to do this, or at least a way that makes more sense?
Oh, that's interesting. I thought you'd go the Samba route rather than FTP, because there's an option in there to set up Samba shares. You didn't think to do that then?
No.
Interesting.
No, I did not.
Oh, right, because if you do that, then they just show up as network shares in most file managers.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, but like I said, like this is networking and like server environments. I really have very little experience with it. I can talk to you for 2 hours about how a GPU works and about the architecture, but when it comes to this stuff, yeah, I'm a noob, big time. Now, you also played with it a little bit, right? Because I think you had just rolled your own NAS from scratch. before?
Yeah, so the NAS that I have is based on Ubuntu 18.04. It's actually Xubuntu rather than Ubuntu Server because it's nice to have a GUI for some things, and it's essentially just a computer that I can use for a bit of light browsing and documents and stuff occasionally. And so I thought, well, why not just have a GUI as well? And so I've got that with a mirrored ZFS pool of 2 6-terabyte disks.
Oh, that's beautiful.
With a 2-terabyte external USB drive, which I have a cron job backing up the really, really important stuff too. So I've kind of got a bit of redundancy. It's not the best solution, but it's better than I had before because I used to just have a ton of external disks and my data was a mess. I wanted something that was centralized and easy to use. And so I just installed Samba on that and then did the config file, which is not that complicated. You just follow some guides and it's all very straightforward, really. And then, boom, it's all just ready to use. And I've been happily using it ever since. I don't have great performance when it comes to read and write speeds because it's only a SATA 2 motherboard and with this mirrored ZFS, it's not great. But I wasn't really that bothered about it because I'm mostly writing to it over Wi-Fi anyway, and I only get sort of, I don't know, about 17 megabytes a second, which is absolutely fine when it comes to reading and writing to the disks. So it's a much simpler solution, I think, than using OpenMediaVault.
It sounds like it, yeah.
But then again, it's not kind of click and drag and GUI. It's got the GUI insofar as that I have got XFCE running on there, but I mostly interact with it either over SSH or just using the file manager. And that's the thing that, with my experience of OpenMediaVault, it's a very powerful tool insofar as you can do an awful lot with it. SSH, FTP, Samba, torrent client. But my concern with new users using it is that it's opening up a lot of this complex software in a way that is a bit too accessible, if you know what I mean. I think that if you grind through each part of it individually, then you will ultimately end up with a greater understanding of how these things work and how they all fit together. Whereas if you've got this sort of one-size-fits-all solution with OpenMediaVault, then you're not really learning that much. You're kind of muddling through and not really learning why things are the way they are.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I had this, pie in the sky vision that I'm just going to install this and I'm going to have my perfect, once I figured it all out, I'm going to have my perfect, personal cloud server and backup solution. In reality, I don't think it's going to shake out like that at all. So what would you recommend? Would you recommend just me doing exactly what you've done with Ubuntu 18.04 and Samba?
Yeah, pretty much. I would say if you've got a laptop or desktop machine that you can set aside for it, then just do that. Just install, if you're happy enough with Ubuntu, most people would say to you, oh, well, just install it headless, just install Ubuntu server and build it all up over SSH. But occasionally it's nice to be able to look stuff up on the browser of the machine rather than having to manually type it in. You can do more copy and paste and stuff. And I think if you're getting into it for the first time, then it makes more sense to just install Ubuntu or whatever distro you want and then build it up afterwards. And as for the streaming, that's not something that I do, but there are definitely solutions that you can install on top of Ubuntu to get that streaming working.
Okay. I'll have to look into it. Yeah, that was a big component of it for me, was just being able to stream either inside my home or outside my home instead of, relying on the Google beast for everything.
Well, accessing it from outside is opening Pandora's box, I think. It's not that complicated, but if it's all on your LAN and you make security mistakes, it's not the end of the world. Whereas once you start opening your LAN up to the rest of the world, the whole internet, that's when you could come into more problems if you don't configure it all properly. And so that's why I generally would advise new users not to do that.
Okay.
At least at first.
So baby steps for me.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people who would disagree with me, but just my advice to people is that it's not that wise. If you're not fully cognizant of exactly what's going on your network, then opening it up to the rest of the world could maybe possibly get dangerous.
Okay, that's good advice. But yeah, the good news is I did get so far as actually loading up some of my music on that box and streaming it both to my other machines in the house and to an Android music app.
Nice.
That felt good. It was a small accomplishment, so it was pretty cool.
And is that with the plugin then?
Yeah, that's just with the I think it's called forked DAAP.
And so I suppose the next step would be to enable Samba on that box so that you can then interact with it more easily. Because how did you do the FTP? Did you install FileZilla or something?
Actually, just from within Nautilus.
Oh, right. It's been a long time since I've used Nautilus. I didn't know that had FTP.
Yeah, I actually stumbled across that. I didn't actually realize you could do that. I know you could do it with, I think you can do it with Windows Explorer, but I don't know who really does that anymore. But yeah, I realized you could just do it in Nautilus. And so then I just added my credentials and boom, then it was drag and drop.
Oh, excellent. It's sort of a similar story with Samba. At least in Thunar and XFCE, you just go to Browse Network and then try and open the folder, and then it asks for your credentials, and then you can tell it to remember forever. And after that, it's just like a local folder, except that slightly slower depending on your network speed.
Ah, okay, great. I think it's really similar to how the FTP functionality works in Nautilus then.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So maybe you don't even need to then if you've already got a nice GUI way of copying files on and off it. Can you create folders and everything?
Actually, I wasn't sure how to create folders anywhere except the OMV web interface.
All right, because with Samba, it's just like having a folder on your local machine. You can just right-click, new folder, name it what you want, open it up, start copying files into it.
Then that sounds like the superior option.
Yeah, or you could use an FTP client, which is a bit clunky. You could use FileZilla to connect to it, and then, I don't know, although FTP is just clunky compared to Samba, I think.
Definitely.
Well, it sounds like you're on track to solve the problem, and maybe OpenMediaVault is going to be the solution you need.
Maybe. I'm gonna spend a few more days with it and probably just start over from scratch and actually dedicate a couple drives to it, put them in RAID, do it how it's properly, right? And yeah, I'll just keep experimenting, and if it works, it works, and if not, I'll try something else. That's all part of the journey, really.
So rumor has it you've just received a Raspberry Pi, and so we might end up talking about that next time.
Yeah, actually, my first ever Raspberry Pi. I have literally no experience with one of those, but there's probably a dozen things I'd like to try with it. So who knows what we'll be talking about.
Yeah, it might be RetroPie. It might be some sort of Kodi situation. It might actually tie in nicely with OpenMediaVault if you can stream some stuff from that to the Pi.
Yeah, definitely. Pi-hole. I mean, yeah, there's just so many. There's no shortage of interesting projects to do with that thing. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've actually got a Raspberry Pi 3, not quite the newest one, that's sitting around doing nothing. So maybe you can inspire me to do something interesting with it.
Deal.
Well, with that, we'd better wrap it up then. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more exciting discoveries.
And if you want to find me on Twitter, I am at KillYourFM.
I'm at Joe Ressington.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.